Welcome. Thank you all very much for joining me for this webinar this afternoon on guiding your team through redundancies, a guide for HR managers and business owners, and actually anyone else that might be involved in that redundancy process that wants to join. Hopefully there'll be some useful information here for you. Just a little bit of housekeeping to start with. I think everyone is on mute, which is really good. It should be set to mute your microphone when you join. Obviously, that's just for the experience of everyone on the session. If you've got one or two people with no microphones, it picks up a lot of background noise. Becomes very, very difficult for people to hear and to concentrate. Please feel free to type questions in the chat box. We will be doing a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. If you've got a real burning question before that point, please do feel free. Obviously, like I say, we are doing Q&A at the end, which is probably the best time to do it, then I can address each question in turn for everybody without kind of losing track of where we are in the webinar. If anyone has any problems, I have done a sound check with one of my colleagues. If you can't hear me and can't see me, or you can see me but you can't hear me, you should be able to see some slides on screen as well. But if you can't see, just let us know. But I'm assuming that everyone's kind of okay on that front. Okay, so to get started, so the outline for this afternoon, I should say we've put the session in for an hour. We probably won't be here for the full hour, but we've got that time put aside so that we've got plenty of time to answer questions at the end. Okay, so what are we going to be covering this afternoon? The budget's impact on redundancies, tools for job seeking support, managing survivor guilt, building resilience in your workforce, and communicating with empathy. And then, obviously, as I mentioned, Q&A session at the end. A little bit about me, not too much. This isn't a session about me, but just so you know who I am and why I'm here talking to you on this Thursday afternoon. So my name is Laurence. I am the Client Services Director for an organisation called Outplacement First. We have been one of the leading providers of outplacement, change, redeployment and transition support to employees really since the late 90s. So in the relatively niche world of outplacement and employee support, we're one of the oldest providers. And I'm proud of the work that we've done in supporting organisations and supporting individuals and groups through change over the last 20 plus years, to make me feel really old. That kind of one-to-one and group support that people get when they're going through a real difficult period like redundancy or a change period it's often invaluable to people, and we get fabulous feedback. Even in the sort of the era now of AI and online tools, that one-to-one support is still really valued by people. So the current landscape, what are we talking about? Why do we need to address the potential issue of redundancies? What is the sort of the market, the landscape, the employment model looking like out there? Well, redundancies sadly are rising. In the past year, redundancy rates have surged by 18.75%, reaching 3.9 per 1,000 employees. That's a figure, it's a statistic, they change, it's a bit of a depressing figure, but it basically means that thousands more people are losing their jobs. And that obviously means for you guys, for HR teams, there is more pressure on you to support those, to manage that change and to support those individuals. Employers are preparing for more job losses, and it is forecast there are going to be more. A quarter of UK employers say they're expecting staff reductions this year in 2025. That's up from just 21% in the last quarter, quarter four of last year. So it is anticipated that there are going to be more redundancies this year. And even redundancies, and hopefully they don't transpire, the anticipation means that obviously there is the preparation for those redundancies, and then obviously the preparation to support employees that are potentially going through that change. In terms of the job market, which obviously has an effect, it isn't bouncing back as quickly as we'd have hoped. The UK unemployment rate has risen to 4.4%. Whilst hiring is slowing down, wages are expected to grow at a much lower rate this year. So this is all a bit of a gloomy picture, but there is some positivity in the webinar as well. But that's just really to kind of set the scene in terms of what we're talking about. You know, if there's a clear landscape with hardly any redundancies in the forecast, and you're talking ad hoc here or there, one or two, probably wouldn't need to have sessions like this. But sadly not the case. So what's the impact? Most of you on the call, I'm sure, are from the HR world. You may have managed redundancies before, you may not, you may be managing them for the first time. It may be that you're going to be managing them for the first time this year. But what is the impact? What does it mean for HR? Well, often it means increased workload because you're managing the redundancies, the support for affected staff, and having to communicate those changes, which are often quite difficult communications to manage. It's very often not a standalone role for an HR business partner, an HR manager, an HR associate to be managing redundancies exclusively. That's their one purpose of their role. It's often in addition to all the other work that they're currently doing. So managing workload and increased workload really does put some extra pressure. There is obviously the pressure in keeping remaining employees engaged as well. So within any redundancy situation, you've got the individuals that are at risk, that are under pressure, but actually the individuals that are not at risk also feel under pressure. You have elements of survivor guilt, but there's just that general uncertainty. As if you see your colleagues at risk of redundancy, even if you know that you're safe, it's naturally going to be unsettling. The greater need for compliance and legal understandings to avoid risks in the redundancy process. Obviously, it's a legal process that has to be managed. That increase in compliance, again, it's extra pressure and extra workload for people working in the HR function. 78% of HR managers have been involved in managing redundancies. However, the vast majority, and this is from a survey from the CIPD, don't feel sufficiently prepared for the process. So it's probably, in HR terms, it's probably one of the least pleasant things you have to deal with when you're working in HR. And yet it's still an area that people often feel that they're not sufficiently prepared to manage. One has to also consider how redundancies impact your team. So what is the impact on staff? Naturally increased stress and anxiety, decrease in employee engagement, often a distrust in management, and staff wanting to jump before they are pushed. Now, I'm talking obviously generally here. If redundancies affect staff in 101 different ways and everyone's different, some people actually welcome it, some people see it coming, some people are ready for a change and they're quite positive about it. But more often than not, and even for those people that do eventually end up seeing it as a positive, more often than not, it does lead to an increase in stress and a decrease in employee engagement. It's very difficult for your workforce to remain as engaged as they were previously when they are potentially facing the fact that the organization doesn't want them anymore. The distrust in management, particularly when redundancies are badly managed, when communication isn't clear, it creates this us and them kind of mentality of the HR team or management or the board or whoever it might be, depending on the size of your organization. They hold all the cards, they know all the information. They are talking about who they're going to get rid of and who they're going to keep, and we're left hanging. So it creates that us and them mentality, which naturally leads to distrust. Staff wanting to jump before they are pushed is quite a common thing, and there is this sometimes this assumption that staff are bound to hang on because it means they'll get their redundancy payment and they'll get some support, but often not. There are lots of people that actually, whenever they will leave a role, they'll start looking for a new job and they will leave because they can see redundancies are on the cards. It may be that they don't know if they're going to be affected or not, but they'd rather just not go through that process. So I mentioned it's not going to be all negative. There is a silver lining to a well-managed redundancy process. Now, redundancy is never going to be the most pleasant thing an employee has to go through, but the silver lining is a well-managed redundancy process is far more positive than obviously a badly managed one. 50% faster re-employment for departing employees with proper structured outplacement support for those individuals. Higher morale and engagement among those staff who remain. And an enhanced reputation for you as an employer. So if the process is managed properly, if communication is made clearly, if departing staff and remaining staff are supported properly, overall the process is better. And actually firsthand through the people that we support, employees are not often, and redundant employees are often not negative about the organization that's let them go if the process has been managed properly, if they've been communicated to clearly, if they've been given proper support that's tailored to their needs, and that the idea of that support is introduced at an early stage, it isn't just kind of thrown at them, the day before they leave. then they'll often be like, I understand why the organization's let me go. It's been struggling for years. I was really well looked after. I got a little bit of redundancy pay. I've had some really good support. Communication was clear and you were. So actually, I've gone in and found another job and everything's worked out well. Obviously, the opposite of that, if communication is bad, if the process isn't managed very well, it just leads to this negative, an increased, even more negative feeling about the organization. So communication, I've mentioned that a couple of times. That the whole process of redundancy really is built on communication. You are communicating potentially negative news to an employee as to whether they have a future at the organization or not. So clear and transparent communication during the redundancy process can reduce survivor guilt and improve morale. Stress levels amongst remaining staff drop by 25% when communication is handled effectively. Again, that's a CIPD survey. So the clear and honest communication, massively important. Share the reasons for the layoffs honestly and address employee concerns openly. If you're dishonest about the reasons that redundancies are happening, the employees will naturally then try and find that out. And again, it creates this us and them mistrust that within the organization. Address employee concerns openly, use empathetic language to validate the feelings of affected remaining employees, and she recognized that it affects everybody different. So one has to be empathetic on an individual one-to-one basis. Regularly update staff with relevant information. So one of the worst things you can do is make an announcement and that's it, right? And I've made the announcement, I've been clear and honest, I've been empathetic, I've addressed concerns, and then do nothing. No further updates, that's it. Because again, anxiety just grows. You've got to update your staff on a regular basis. Even if there isn't an update, right? Update them on even if the update is we don't have a further update at this point, it will be on this date. At least people feel like they're being kept in the loop. The worst thing that can happen to you as an employee is have some bad news and feel like you've been removed from the information process. You've been removed from it, you're kept out of the loop, and you just have this idea of rumors and stuff circulating within the organization. So update your staff on a regular basis, be direct and kind. I would avoid sugarcoating the issue, but there's no getting around it, but use language that shows empathy. And one could be empathetic whilst also being, relatively direct, and avoiding kind of sugarcoating or patronizing language. Acknowledge the difficulty for the situation for departing staff and remaining staff. And again, I'll come on to remaining staff. They shouldn't be forgotten in this process either. This idea that, well, you're safe, your roles, your department, your team is not part of this process, so therefore you're okay. Again, you're still working for an organization that's going through a difficult period of change. So we need to recognize that. Follow up with each employee individually to address lingering concerns. Check in with your employees on a regular basis. It goes a long way. In terms of remaining staff, so I've mentioned this idea of looking after remaining staff as well as those that are leaving or at risk. Survivor guilt. So employees who remain often experience survivor guilt, wondering why they stayed while others left. It can lead to disengagement. Your role might be completely safe. You might work in an area that's ring fenced. There's no risk that your role is going to be made redundant. However, lots of your colleagues are going through this difficult period. Naturally, it's going to be unsettling. 33% of employees who remain after layoffs report feeling survivor guilt, struggling with the emotional impact of keeping their jobs while others are let go. And actually, we work as teams, we work collectively, often as people together. So, when something comes in and breaks that collective nature of the way you work, of course, it's going to be unsettling. So acknowledge the impact and provide space for employees to share their feelings. Regularly reassure them about their value to the organization. Consider peer support sessions for team check-ins. Consider arranging some support sessions, either one-to-one or group sessions for employees that are remaining within the organization. It's normal to offer support to those that are leaving. Most organizations don't actually offer support to those that are remaining, but that is something that you can organize, whether it's coping with change, developing and building emotional resilience, understanding value and worth, maybe some additional sort of team building training, that kind of thing, to kind of repair some of the damage that the process has done, worth considering. In terms of obviously supporting staff that are leaving, when organisations support redundant staff, it does help alleviate survivor syndrome among remaining employees. reduces guilt, improves morale, fosters loyalty. I would be definitely providing support to your employees, practical support to help them move forward. Again, you'll know your employees obviously much better than we do. You'll usually have a mixture. Some people may have been in the organization a long time, may have not had to look for a job for quite a long time. There may be people that have had to look for a job quite recently, have been through it quite recently. It doesn't make it any more easier for them. Support on areas like how to network, both in person and remotely, how to put together a really good CV and a cover letter, interview guidance and support, LinkedIn, emotional support and tools. I would stress the importance of networking. Now, networking is something people can do pretty much straight away. And some employees will network all the time, whether they're looking for a job or not. So if employees ask, what can I be getting on with? Like, my role has been placed at risk. I'm on this 2 to 3 month notice period. I'm not going to find out until quarter 3. It's probably going to be maybe not till September that I end up leaving or whatever. It may be quite ahead of time, but what can I be doing now? The first thing I would encourage them to do is start to do some networking, start to build up their network. It's not the same as just going out and applying for jobs, right? Which some probably would be a bit early, but you can start to build your network, and the value of a good, strong network is huge when it comes to looking for a job and elsewhere. 70% of jobs are found through networking. Like, the role of networking, recommendation, referral is huge in recruitment. So that's something that you can advise your staff to do. They can use LinkedIn, they can advise industry events, they can join professional groups. They can maintain and build and follow up with their contacts on a regular basis. So when it does get to the point that they may need to tap into that network for their job search, it's there for them. 75% of people who recently changed jobs use LinkedIn. The LinkedIn is a networking tool, massively valuable, as well as a job search tool and a professional social media tool. A lot of people have hang-ups about social media, me included, right? So that's fine. But LinkedIn, a very, very valuable tool. And this builds into the idea of starting to build your network. So that's something you can encourage your employees, obviously, to do, as you move forward. There's a few ways they can leverage LinkedIn on a practical basis. The first thing I would be suggesting, maybe connect with industry professionals, connect with potential employers. Joining relevant groups to participate in discussions is valuable. You think to other forms of social media, Facebook, I suppose, being the most obvious example. Most of a Facebook newsfeed is nonsense. It's just people sharing pictures of their cats and pictures of what they had for breakfast and this kind of thing, in my view. Where Facebook is useful is the groups. So for me, in my world, I'm on some professional Facebook groups. I'm on a Facebook group for running. I'm on some hiking groups because they're my interests. If I was a musician, I probably would be on similar groups there. Joining relevant groups, professional groups on LinkedIn, hugely valuable. There are HR groups, there are finance groups, there are IT groups, there are groups for NHS staff, everything you can kind of think of. It's a great way of participating in discussions, getting up-to-date information on the market, meeting and engaging with new people, building up your contacts, that kind of thing. Increase them to create and share relevant content. A lot of people make the mistake of just creating a LinkedIn profile and thinking, right, that's it, done. Like having a website and never using it. Create a profile, yes, and make sure it's up to date and it's consistent with your CV and your cover letter, that kind of thing. But they should use LinkedIn on a practical basis. So connecting with people, joining groups, posting relevant content. It helps get more engagement levels. It helps get people looking at you. It's a great way of kind of building conversations and increasing visibility. As little as 10 minutes a day on LinkedIn. You can do quite a lot. 10 to 15 minutes a day on LinkedIn is a minimum. They can build up that time as they get closer maybe to their exit date. There is the job search function on LinkedIn as well, and there are some roles that are exclusive to LinkedIn that are not advertised anywhere else. So something to bear in mind as well. All right. Another thing you can support employees with kind of ahead of time is starting to build emotional resilience. That kind of idea of a strong mindset to help get them through a period. Again, that's something we provide coaching on as well. 5 big benefits for maintaining a positive mindset. It does provide a protective buffer against anxiety and depression, improves one's problem-solving abilities, rather than view a problem as something that's going to kind of cast you down and be an obstacle. It's something that you can overcome. It enhances coping mechanisms. It does maintain confidence, and it keeps you motivated, having that positive view of life professionally. A few kind of quick tips really to help build your emotional resilience. Again, this is something you can encourage staff to do from kind of quite an early point when the potential for change is on the horizon. Mindfulness and meditation, practice daily. There's some apps, some great apps for meditation. It's not necessarily a big spiritual thing. Meditation, so many people practice it just as a way of focusing and clearing the mind. Headspace is a great app. I use that one. There's an app called Calm as well. Most of them are free. There are subscriptions, obviously, to avoid adverts and stuff, but you can get a lot from the free apps. Regular physical activity, hugely important to well-being. I try and get out every lunchtime, a short walk or a run or a cycle or a swim on a regular basis, but just getting outside, especially now the weather's a bit better, for half an hour a day, whatever it might be, makes a huge difference. Eating healthily. And I think that the danger is when you're going through stress is to fall back on junk food, crisps, too much caffeine, too much sugar, too much alcohol, whatever it might be. It's only going to have a negative effect on your resilience, not a positive one. So, a healthy, balanced diet will provide that kind of mental and physical support that you need to get through a difficult period. Social support, talked a little bit about networking on that, more on the professional side, but staying connected with friends and family. There are support groups and online forums, hugely important. And setting goals as well, like break goals into small manageable steps and celebrate small victories. Again, that sounds a bit cheesy, but actually for some people, just creating a LinkedIn profile and connecting with 3 people is a good goal. Just making a point of going out for a walk 3 times a week rather than spending lunchtime sitting on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it might be. Doing that on a regular basis, really important as well. So that's a few things that can be done. Self-care, take care of yourself, HR as well. This we've talked about remaining employees. We've talked about like survivor guilt for and people that are leaving. Look after yourselves as well. So important. Seek support from work, family, and friends. Focus on what you can control. Talk about your feelings. Don't bottle them up. Celebrate the wins. Yeah, celebrate the positive things. You cannot outsource support. So throughout a redundancy process, if you're looking for maybe an external provider to provide support, there are organizations such as ourselves that will do that with things like career coaching, developing job search strategies, CV reviews, mock interviews. That will really save time for HR as well as provide support for those employees. And putting some external support in place really shows care for departing employees and helps reduce survivor guilt for those people there. All right. So a few takeaways: be prepared for potential redundancies, communicate with transparency, address survivor guilt, provide support for redundant staff, and outsource whatever support you can. All right. That's probably enough of me chatting away. If anyone has any questions, please do just drop them into the chat and I'll be more than happy to answer those. So just a question here. Have you got any tips on dealing with angry staff? It's in the middle of redundancies, is not going down well. Now, yeah, it's a good question. Now, again, I guess it's kind of everything that I've talked about in many ways. Staff are going to react in different ways. There are some that are going to be very angry. There are some that are going to be quite positive about it. Some that will, we talk about the change curve starting with denial right through to acceptance and everything in between. There are staff that are going to be angry. And it's a mixture of things, I would say. First of all, it is clear and honest communication with them throughout. No matter how angry staff are, they will appreciate you being honest with them, keeping them up to date on the situation, giving them regular updates as to where they are. Introduce the idea that they're going to be supported right from the beginning. A lot of organizations kind of as the employee is about to leave or a few days before they leave say, oh yeah, we've organized some outplacement support for you. Now often those employees could have done with it 2 months earlier. Most outplacement support is and certainly the way that we provide it is for employees to get ready so they're fully prepared to do their job search. that's not much good if it's 2 days before you leave. Right from the beginning of the process, that should be introduced. Even if you're not going to outsource it, introducing some of those tips that I mentioned earlier, right from the beginning of the process as well, will really kind of help them all the way through. Um, Give them updates on people that have left. So remaining staff, as much as you can. One of the good ways of increasing morale with surviving staff is to give them updates on their colleagues that have left and how well they've got on. So and so left, has got another job. So and so is doing really well, has got 3 interviews next week. So and so has achieved a more senior role in a new organisation. So and so has actually started their own business and is doing really well. So it shows the kind of there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's life after the organisation, so to speak. How much does outplacement cost? That's a good question. Most organizations, surely including us, have a range of different packages depending on the how many sessions that the person wants, depending on whether the organization wants it delivered on a one-to-one basis or as a group, whether it's on-site or remote delivery, and obviously depending on seniority. Sometimes the more senior people have more sessions, that kind of thing. So there's a range of different options. If that's something you're interested in exploring, obviously we can provide some kind of details. Advice on how to break the initial news. Yeah, that's always the most difficult thing is breaking the initial news, planning individual meetings, speaking to people individually. You've got to do a balance of the two. So obviously individuals that are affected by the redundancy have to be spoken to on an individual basis because they're all going to have individual reactions. But you don't want to create this kind of atmosphere of rumor and us and them. So you've got everyone should know that there is redundancies happening. There should be a general announcement, and then people should be spoken to individually as well. Again, honest and clear communication. It's really difficult. There's no point sugarcoating it. People are going to know. Usually, as soon as you get a meeting invite with someone from HR on it, it's what you expect. So, like breaking any bad news, talking around the issue, sugarcoating it, acting like it's not going to happen, not great. I would get pretty much to the point, be as direct but as empathetic as possible. Get them to take some time to reflect on how they feel. I would also introduce, from those initial meetings, let them know that they're going to be supported all the way through the process by yourselves and potentially an external provider if that's something that you're looking at, and maybe get them to talk about the areas in which they may feel that they need support. You can mention that from an early point. We're going to be organising some support for you when it comes to your job search, when it comes to looking for something else. When you get to that point, are there any key areas you think you may need support? And we'll arrange those. Okay. Questions seem to be dying off. If anyone would like any more information on anything outplacement related, I'm more than happy to provide sort of proposals, information on programs, content, etc. in terms of what we provide. But otherwise, just thank you all so much for coming, for sharing the time on what is quite a sunny Thursday afternoon, and I wish you all the kind of very best moving forward.